Resist much, obey little. Once unquestioning obedience, once fully enslaved. Once fully enslaved, no nation, state, city of this earth ever afterward resumes its liberty. These were the words of caution offered by the great poet Walt Whitman to his fellow Americans. Whitman recognized that crucial to a free and flourishing society are men and women who are willing to question and even resist authority when necessary. But today, very few of us live by the ideal espoused by Whitman. Instead, blind obedience is the norm. We have become populations of sheep, easily herded into the chains of tyranny. But what has led those of us in the West to largely shun the advice of Whitman? In this video, we will examine two institutions that have played an integral role in the breeding of a passive citizenry: the compulsory state-run education system, which in North America is called the public school system, and the mainstream media. Public schooling is viewed as one of the shining lights of the modern Western world. Who could question the value of an institution that provides free and compulsory education for all? But, as with many institutions of our day, the textbook picture of how these institutions should work greatly diverges from the reality of how they do work. If public schools taught individuals how to think, if they promoted intellectual curiosity and produced citizens healthy in body and mind, then few would question their value. But beneath the veneer presented by the bureaucrats that run this institution, a darker reality emerges. John Taylor Gatto, a former teacher turned one of public schooling's greatest critics, sheds light on this. Noam Chomsky echoed a similar sentiment in his book Understanding Power, where he described how education systems often serve as tools of indoctrination. To some, this may sound like heresy, but a study of history reveals that this was the intention from the very beginning. The state-run school systems in the West were modeled off the factory-style education first introduced in Prussia in the early 1700s. This system prioritized obedience and conformity over creativity and critical thinking. Albert Einstein, an individual who reached heights of genius rarely seen, did not credit his compulsory schooling with his intellectual development. Reflecting back on his school years, Einstein noted that after completing his final examinations, his interest in the field he would go on to revolutionize was all but dead. Einstein believed that one of the major flaws of compulsory state-run education systems is their forced style of teaching. After well over a decade of indoctrination in the school system, few emerge with a great thirst for knowledge and a curiosity toward the many mysteries of the world. Instead, as Bruce Levine writes in his book Resisting Illegitimate Authority, by the time a student graduates, they are often drained of the independent thinking needed to challenge societal norms. But if our schooling cannot be relied upon to generate the critical and curious minds needed to protect a society from the actions of corrupt authorities, can the mainstream media play this role? While there has been increasing skepticism toward this institution in recent years, distaste and distrust of the mainstream media has a long history. Nietzsche, one of the most intellectually free and curious minds in history, was also no fan of the mainstream media. Richard Weaver, a professor at the University of Chicago in the first half of the 20th century, found it ironic that while we have freed ourselves from the Earth-centric view of the cosmos, we have simultaneously plunged headlong into an illusory view of the world created by the media. While Weaver focused on newspapers in his critique, as they were the dominant medium of his day, his words are even more applicable today. Modern technologies have provided far more sophisticated tools for manipulating the masses. But why does the mainstream media so often choose deception over truth? Noam Chomsky, in his book Media Control, suggests that like many politicians, the mainstream media is dominated by individuals who adhere to an elitist ideology. The 20th century journalist Walter Lippmann epitomized this view, calling the masses the bewildered herd and suggesting that one of the main functions of the media is to put this herd in its proper place, as passive spectators, not active participants, in the organization of society. For those of us who are not among the self-anointed elite, the question arises, is this control exerted over the masses done to promote a prosperous and flourishing society, or is it merely a means of maintaining institutional structures that favor the elites at the expense of society at large? This open question only reinforces the need for a more skeptical attitude toward the authority figures of our day. We need, in other words, more anti-authoritarians. It must be stressed that an anti-authoritarian is not someone who, in place of a passive acceptance of authority, adopts a passive rejection of all authority. Many institutions and authority figures serve a beneficial purpose and should be respected. However, anti-authoritarians recognize that consensus does not equate to truth, that power corrupts, that people lie, and that some institutions, in the words of Chomsky, are designed not to serve the public good, but to maintain control. Recognizing these undeniable facts, the anti-authoritarian is willing to look at all authority figures with a healthy dose of skepticism and potentially even resist their commands if such authority proves corrupt and harmful to society's well-being. As Henry David Thoreau wrote, "Disobedience is the true foundation of liberty. The obedient must be slaves." But should we fear a world with more anti-authoritarians? The obedience bred into us in school and the blind deference to authority promoted by the talking heads of the mainstream media may lead some to view anti-authoritarians as a threat to the stability of society. Nothing could be further from the truth. Anti-authoritarians are the crucial protectors of a flourishing society. For, as the author C.P. Snow observed, when you think of the long and gloomy history of man, you will find more hideous crimes have been committed in the name of obedience than have ever been committed in the name of rebellion. Malevolent authority combined with a passive citizenry is a recipe for tyranny. Anti-authoritarians should not be feared or ostracized, they should be welcomed. They are the individuals who raise the alarm and awaken the slumbering masses to the existence of corrupt authority. A society without a healthy number of anti-authoritarians, or one in which anti-authoritarians are shunned and silenced, is a society that has chosen the comfort of illusions over the desire for truth. It is, therefore, a society paving the way for its own destruction. As the 18th century French philosopher Voltaire cautioned, "Those who can make you believe absurdities can make you commit atrocities." Education and information are supposed to make us smarter, but what if they're doing the opposite? Public schools and the mainstream media have a subtle way of shaping us, not to think for ourselves, but to follow a path that's already laid out. Schools focus on memorizing facts, following rules, and passing tests. Creativity and curiosity, they often don't fit into the picture. The same happens with the media. Headlines grab our attention, but they rarely give us the full story. Instead of digging deeper, we're handed pre-packaged ideas designed to keep us distracted and divided. It's not about informing us, it's about controlling the way we see the world. When schools teach us to obey and the media floods us with half-truths, we lose the ability to question, to think critically, and to see beyond the surface. It's a system that wants us to stay comfortable and passive, not curious or independent, but we don't have to accept this. Breaking free starts with asking questions and refusing to take everything at face value. Think about what you're being taught, challenge the stories you're being told, and take back the power of your own mind. The system can only control those who don't think for themselves. The moment you start thinking independently, you begin to see the world as it really is, and that's where true freedom begins. The media simplifies complex issues, turning them into bite-sized narratives that are easy to consume but hard to challenge. It keeps us distracted, entertained, and emotionally charged. And when we're caught up in the noise, we rarely stop to think about what's missing, what's distorted, or what's deliberately left out. The goal is not to make us smarter or more aware. It's to shape our perceptions, to control the conversation, and to ensure we never look too deeply into the systems that govern our lives. Together, public schools and the media create a cycle. We're taught to accept information without questioning it, and then we're bombarded with stories that reinforce the same narrow worldview. But what happens when we step back and start to see the bigger picture? What happens when we question the lessons we've learned and the stories we've been told?